It is with great pleasure that I finally can say the words, welcome to the greenhouse.
Do I build a greenhouse in my new yard? I like to build a greenhouse.
Now about the greenhouse. The greenhouse is underway.
The greenhouse.
You guys, I can't believe I'm sitting here right now. This has been the longest wait of my short YouTube career. I have been talking to you guys about this greenhouse build for months and months and months. It was delayed by the HOA, it was delayed by budgets, it was delayed by childbirth, but it's finally ready, and I am beyond excited to share with you the entire journey from start to finish. Let's go all the way back to the beginning while I briefly explain why build a greenhouse. This is totally a personal preference kind of thing. Most of the rare tropical houseplant community enjoy growing their collection indoors, whether that's in an Ikea cabinet, a grow tent, or a dedicated room in your home. And that's how my houseplant collection started. I had plants here and there. Some of them were in the kitchen, a few in the living room, and some in the dining room. But as the collection grew, I found them to be more and more consolidated into one space. I think my first dedicated singular plant setup was like a plastic hobby greenhouse that I put in a spare bedroom upstairs. But when my plants outgrew that small plastic greenhouse, we converted a screened-in porch to a growing room, and I had the whole collection in a screened-in porch for about a year. But my collection continued to grow, and I knew the day would soon come where it was taking over more of my home than I was willing to give it. So when my family and I moved into a new home in April of this year, I had a vision to build an actual legitimate greenhouse in the backyard. This dream come true took a lot of planning, a lot of financing, and a lot of patience. But I am so pleased to have this dedicated space for the entire collection with tons of room to grow and produce more content for you. So this video that you're about to watch is divided into two segments because I want this to be both an informative video and an entertaining one. So part one of this video is all about planning your greenhouse build. If that doesn't apply to you, if you're content growing in an indoor space, be that in a cabinet or a grow tent, or you just know that you're nowhere near needing an entire greenhouse, you can go ahead and skip that part of the video. I'll put the timestamp at the bottom of the screen where part two begins. And part two is my personal vlog of constructing what you see here. However, if you think that you may want to build a greenhouse at some point in the future, I encourage you to go ahead and watch part one because I hope that it will have a lot of information that you will find helpful.
In selecting and planning your greenhouse build, there are so many things to consider. I'm just going to touch on what I find to be the most important ones because your specific conditions might be completely different than mine. But the first thing you're definitely going to need to consider are the temperatures in your climate zone. I think where I am is called Zone 7B. Basically, these are agricultural hardiness zones that are used to describe kind of how cold it gets. And that is really only applicable when you're growing like seasonal outdoor plants like veggies and produce. So I don't really go off zones. I don't really think it makes too much of a difference, but I know that I think there's actually only one zone in the United States where these kind of tropical aroids could grow outdoors year-round, and of course, that's Florida. As for me, in central North Carolina, it gets both really hot in the summer and really cold in the winter. But for my plants and my collection, I have found the minimum and maximum temperatures that they can withstand. I learned this over the past year as my plants were growing in a semi-outdoor area, an enclosed porch that didn't have heating or air, and I just went off of ventilation fans in the summer or a heater in the winter. And over that time, I learned that the minimum my plants liked was about 65 degrees Fahrenheit and the max 80. Now, of course, they can actually survive a little bit more extreme temperatures than this, but 65 to 80 is my range for my greenhouse that I would like to keep it at throughout the year. So where I am, I have to think a lot, not only about how to keep them warm in the winter, but how to keep them cool in the summer. Just this summer, we had highs in the 100s, and anthurium do not do well in that. That's not their natural environment. So I did a little bit of research and compiled a couple different ways to keep my greenhouse cool. You can use a shade cloth or just put your greenhouse in a shaded area. You can also install a misting system. This will cool the air inside your greenhouse. It also does wonders for the humidity. You could look into installing an exhaust fan and, of course, adding some extra ventilation. The thing about greenhouses is that by nature, they're designed to extend the growing season by keeping your growing area warmer. People who grow tomatoes, for example, can start their growing season earlier if they grow their tomatoes in a greenhouse because the greenhouse is designed to trap heat. So for me, it seemed like the biggest challenge was, how do I undo that in the summer? How do I keep the greenhouse cool? Because I do not want it trapping heat in the summer when it's already 95 or 100 degrees outside. Now, on the other side of the same coin is keeping your greenhouse warm enough in the winter. And again, so much of this is going to vary depending on your location and your plants. But I needed to think also about this because in North Carolina, we do even get snow. We do even get ice storms. It's not every year, but even if the snow doesn't fall, we're definitely always cold enough for snow. And so a couple different ways to keep a greenhouse warm throughout the winter. You definitely want to make sure that your gaps are sealed so that any warm air is not escaping the greenhouse and cool air is not entering in. You can also buy a heater, which is a super practical approach. You can look into a kerosene heater or an electric heater. I also did learn that there is a plastic insulation wrap that you can, once a year, once it starts to get cold, wrap your greenhouse in the insulation wrap, and you can take it off in the spring when temperatures start to warm. But here's the thing about temperatures. It is so important that I really didn't want to mess it up. And so I decided to solve my problems of extreme heat and extreme cold by buying a mini split unit equipped for cool and heat. Now, don't get me wrong, it was an additional expense to the build, but I think it's really going to be worth it. This unit that we're going to install is going to provide air conditioning in the summer and heat in the winter. My plants are going to be living their best life. And honestly, I think it's going to make the space more enjoyable to be in for me personally while I'm doing my plant care or creating content. Or even, as a family, we could spend some time in there if we wanted to. It'll be a nice space with it being climate controlled. And it wasn't as crazy as you might think. My greenhouse I ended up selecting, which we'll get to later, but it's only about 130 square feet, which is a small area when you're talking about, heating and cooling. And I was able to afford a mini split unit that had the correct BTU for my square footage. I just needed something 9,000 BTU. That is a number that refers to the output. And I really think that this mini split unit, although it was a couple extra $100, I think it's going to make such a big difference and provide a lot of peace of mind that my plants are going to do well throughout the year. The other measures I will be taking are that I'm putting it in a shaded area. I will be installing a misting system and a fan for air circulation in the summer. And I will be buying a backup heater to use in the space for winter. Not sure yet whether or not I will use kerosene or electric, but just something as a backup plan. Now, it should go without saying, but I don't know yet if this will work, okay? I have done the research for my conditions, for my climate zone, for my greenhouse, for my plants, and I'm going to take it, a month at a time as we move into the winter months. And then next summer will be the first summer they're out in extreme heat. And of course, you guys know I will keep you updated, and I'm definitely planning to do a 1 year of growing in the greenhouse update video 12 months from now to address concerns that inevitably will pop up when these temperatures do get extreme. But it did play a huge part in my planning process as I was trying to figure out, can I even do this? Will this even work? Will the plants die? I'll also suggest something that my husband suggested to me is to kind of have a backup plan. As lovely as it would be for all the planning to work out and for extreme temperatures to not affect the greenhouse, you can't know that they won't. And so in the event that my greenhouse is unable to stay warm enough during the winter or cool enough during the summer, we can move the plants back inside and readjust. But I would say temperatures is probably one of the biggest things that needs to have some serious sit down brainstorming and planning before you begin your greenhouse build. Now, the next thing is lighting. And you'd be surprised, especially if you're growing tropical plants, that this actually does require some consideration. You might think to just put your greenhouse in a sunny spot, but actually, a lot of our plants in nature, if you are visiting the jungles of South America, you're going to see that Monstera and Philodendron and Anthurium and Scindapsus, they grow in what's called the understory. And above them are really tall trees with really fat leaves that provide a natural shade year round. And the plants that we like to grow for our collection, they don't want full sun. They don't like full sun. So consider the natural lighting as you're planning out your greenhouse. Don't plan to put it in a full sun area of your yard. This is important both for lighting and for heat, as we've already discussed. So the simplest thing to do is to just head over to Amazon and buy a $25 light meter like I did. This thing is really cool because I was able to check what sort of foot candle output my plants have been getting on my grow shelves. I've never measured lighting before. I've never really thought twice about it. Look up, do a little bit of research. How many foot candles do your plants want? My plants, since I have Monstera and Anthurium, kind of require a wider range. Monstera can take a lot of light and Anthurium cannot. But I wanted to get that right balance to where all of the plants were getting enough light, not too much and not too little. So for my collection, that came out to about 250 to 400 foot candles. So I took my light meter. I was first curious if that's what they were getting under my grow lights, and it was. But then I took the light meter out to my yard, and I tried a few different spots. Not only did I do this on one day, I did this on several different days. On a cloudy day, I went out, checked my spots. On a sunny day, I went out, and also different times of the day, because as you know, the sun moves throughout the day, so your light reading at 9 a.m. is going to be different than what it reads at 12 p.m. and at 3 p.m. But I had my preferred spot in mind, and I'm honestly really happy that it was the right light reading for what I needed. My average reading in my preferred location ranged from 200 to 300 foot candles. Some bright spots reached as high as 700 to 1,000, but that was only at like specific times of the day if the sun broke through the leaves just right. I'm very fortunate that in my yard, my preferred spot, the most level area of ground, also happened to be in between two very tall oak trees. So although this isn't a rainforest, I do kind of have the understory happening here. This area in between the oak trees is naturally shaded throughout the whole day, but plenty of dappled light still comes through these oak trees, and I think the lighting's going to be really perfect. Of course, you can err on the side of too little light and always reintroduce a couple of grow lights in certain spots or for certain plants if you need it. Alternatively, if you wanted to put your greenhouse in an area that had more sun, or maybe you don't have a shady area on your property, circle back to that shade cloth product that not only I mentioned would help with keeping temperatures cool, but It does what it says in the name. It provides shade. You'll also want to put some thought into planning out your foundation. There are plenty of options. You can go with a dirt floor. You can go with a gravel floor. For me, because I was going to be a little bit extra anyways, I really wanted a concrete floor because I wanted the greenhouse to be as close to an indoor space as possible. I wanted to be able to seal the gaps so that there wasn't a cold air or warm air exchange happening at the ground level that I couldn't control. Also, I kind of wanted to keep bugs out because I know that this makes me sound like a really wimpy plant grower. But I don't really like bugs, and I kind of don't want them to be unwelcome in my greenhouse. The concrete, though, was definitely an added expense, so just consider that as you are doing your planning. I'm really excited that we went with a concrete foundation, but just know that you don't have to do that to have a functional greenhouse. And then there is selecting your greenhouse. Now, this is so subjective. It really depends on you, your growing needs, your plants, how many you have, what kind of space you're looking at, and of course, what you can afford. You can choose to build one yourself from scratch by drawing the plans and buying lumber, or you can choose to take the route I took, which is just selecting a greenhouse kit where all of your materials and products have already been sourced, measured, cut to size, boxed up, delivered to your door. And I think that that might also be the more cost-effective version, but there's a lot less room for customization here. But I'm really excited about the greenhouse I selected. So on May 23rd, I was finally able to order everything I needed for the greenhouse, and the very next day, I got to work on the landscaping, clearing out the area in my yard that I had designated for this spot. This time lapse would have been a lot cuter if it was actually in focus, but this is just proof that I did a lot of this work by myself. I was second trimester in the pregnancy, so I was capable, and more than anything, I was just really eager to begin the work and get started. But the landscaping kicked my butt, and a week later, my husband finished it for me. I'd say I did about 75%.
Don't forget put in the video
That you did this.
you did have to work, but then
But I'm not gonna lie, it is really nice to have a strong man come and finish it up. He did in 30 minutes what took me about a week to do myself. So it was nice. It was very nice of him to finish it for me, and I just really appreciated having this area cleared and beginning to envision the greenhouse. So, a few packages came today. This is supposed to be the greenhouse. I'm trying not to be too dramatic, but we have box 2 of 3, and we have box 3 of 3, and that's it. And I find it odd if the other box wasn't shipped with these two. That wouldn't make sense. I feel like FedEx kind of forgot to drop off a box. Well, the final box is here. It's been about a week, and I just chose to wait it out, see if it showed up. The box is looking really rough, so I'm actually taking a video just in case I open up the box and we've got damaged pieces. I'll send this. Here's how it's looking. So it's like broken in 2 sections. This is completely broken. I can stick my hand all the way up through this. And then on the other side, same problem, broken here. I can put my hand in all the way. And then here, also broken, which is a little disconcerting, especially if the panels, the PVC panels are in this box. If the box looks that bad, I sure hope the panels are fine, but we'll see once we open it up. Well, I can't believe it, but today we are starting the greenhouse project. We've got about 8 to 10 weeks to complete this before I have a baby. I'm actually 30 weeks pregnant right now,
which means I get to be a lot like you. I'm just gonna be watching this process happen. My husband is so incredible. He is out there right now framing out the concrete foundation for this greenhouse. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish eating my breakfast, and then we're gonna head outside and watch the process as my husband John frames out the foundation, and I think he might even be laying concrete today too.
Unnecessary input.
Okay, you need an update. It has been 1 month since what you just watched. That concrete is the hardest thing I think my husband has ever done, physical labor wise. I mean, he is a strong man and he has got a great work ethic. But after pouring that small square of concrete that you saw just in the last clip, he and I have both been beside ourselves because there is no way he can do the entire slab by himself. And me, who is now 34 weeks pregnant, I am no help at all. What's more, he kind of hates the way that that concrete square turned out, just the portion that he was able to do. John doesn't really think it looks that great, and he kind of wants to go to Lowe's and buy a sledgehammer and smash it all up. So we have been in a little bit of a predicament for the past month, trying to figure out how are we going to get this done. I've already spent the money to buy the concrete material, to buy the greenhouse itself and everything I'm gonna need for that greenhouse. And I'm kind of cashed out and I can't really afford to hire professionals to do that concrete. We did get a few quotes. They were ranging from like $1,700 to $2,400. And it just seemed really depressing for a while. I did not know what we were gonna do. But you guys, I'm not being silly. I prayed about it. I literally said, God, I know that this is such a small thing in the big old universe, but we need some help with this concrete. Otherwise, it's not gonna get done. My greenhouse is not gonna get built. I'm gonna have the baby in the fall with nowhere to put my plants and they're all gonna die. And I was really worried about it. So I literally prayed, and the same exact day, I learned that a family friend does concrete and that he was willing to give us a special rate, something I actually could afford. So he will be here on Wednesday, just in a few days. And I'm really excited about this because I felt pretty guilty making John do all of that work while I just sat there in the chair and couldn't help. And especially once he reached the point where he sat me down and said, I don't think I can do the rest. So it's gonna be wonderful to have somebody who knows what they're doing. He says it'll be a one-day job, and so that's what you're about to see next. Concrete getting poured the right way.
We have had so many rain delays. It is not even funny at this point. Today is August 15th and concrete is getting poured. The crew is just picking up the rest of the bags of the concrete mix, and
By the end of the day, this should be a complete concrete pad, and this is like down to the wire. You guys, I am 36 weeks pregnant now, and I just really hope that we can get the greenhouse built and complete before the baby's born. But at this point, I'm not even sure. But very excited that this is finally getting done today.
And I've got these guys that finish concrete like when I have.
It is literally hard to wrap my brain around the fact that this project is actually moving forward. With the concrete poured, we are ready for some next steps. And one small little touch I wanted to add for this build is to actually paint the concrete floor. Because although I did choose concrete for the functionality, it definitely does not have the aesthetic that I would want in a dream greenhouse. I would actually love a brick floor. And so I figured instead of actually going through the time and labor and cost of a real brick floor, I wanted to paint the concrete to look like brick. So let me put up on the screen my little inspiration photo. Something similar to this is fine. Just kind of like a herringbone pattern of some, antiqued looking brick. So I've printed that photo out, and I'm here at Lowe's so that I can take the photo to the paint section, maybe choose like 3 or 4 different colors and just buy like a little sample jar. And I'm going to make some kind of like stamp for the brick. I'm not going to hand paint them. So I'm either going to like cut a sponge down to size, or maybe I'll just buy one brick and like glue sponge onto that. Something like that. The idea is not like 100% formed in my mind.
So laying these fake bricks was honestly so much fun. And so I'm just going to briefly take you through my process. And, if you want to try this yourself, I definitely recommend it. It ended up being a lot more difficult than I thought it would be, but it was still fun. So I took some paper plates and I poured out a small amount of all 4 of my colors. And what I wanted to achieve was just the right balance of randomness. I'm definitely not trying to create a pattern here. I'm kind of trying to not think so much about what color to use next. I'm okay with colors kind of mixing and blending on the sponge because I think that actually looks maybe more authentic. I started by just laying the perimeter of bricks, since those would just go in a straight line around the edge. And at this point, I was feeling really excited and very satisfied with the process. And I decided to go ahead and throw in the herringbone pattern. Hindsight is 2020. I regret starting this at this point. It seemed like it would be a lot easier than it turned out to be. It is evidently a very mathematical pattern that is all about the correct angles, and just eyeballing it worked for a couple of minutes, and it quickly started to go very, very wrong. Eventually, small little mistakes in the pattern led to worse and worse problems. And just this entire process, it was a mix of both, like, this is really fun, but this is also really challenging. And I made adjustments as I went. I tried to correct the pattern. I still don't think it looks perfect, but I'm just reminding myself that this is literally just the floor. Nobody's going to see it. Nobody's going to notice the mistakes. There's probably going to be plants or shelves covering this up.
Okay, we have this half more or less done. Just do me a favor and pretend that you cannot see the mistakes in the herringbone pattern. I'm gonna fix it when I go in by hand and paint the grout. I'm gonna align them up a little bit better, but I am just tired of being hot and sweaty and sticky. And I'm out of paint. That took all of my paint samples. So we'll have to take another trip to Lowe's, get more paint samples to do the second half. I'm really excited with how it looks. Take a look at it again.
After dinner, I came back outside. Kids were super interested. Husband gave me a fan to keep me cool, and I painted by hand all of the grout lines using the grout color that I'd selected. This really helped, I think, because I was able to correct some of the mistakes in the brick, but The grout lines weren't all perfect. They weren't all straight. Some of them were a little bit crooked. I think it looks okay, but we're not quite done. I circled back a few days later and touched up a lot of these bricks by hand with a paintbrush, and that made a huge difference in regards to the mistakes in the herringbone pattern and just smoothing everything out. I was finally happy with how this half looked, but moving forward on the second half of the pad, I decided to take a completely different approach. I used this tool, which I should have been using the whole time. And I actually used the sponge almost like a stencil, and I used my grout color to mark out the entire pattern. This was still tedious, and believe it or not, somehow I still made mistakes, but there were a lot less mistakes. So this was the approach I used for the entire second half. I didn't always use the triangle tool. I just used it to get me started or to check on any areas where I wasn't sure how to angle the brick pattern. But doing this approach, the stenciling out with my sponge, I'm happy I did this. And I would have done this in the first half if I would have really thought about it. I was a little bit too eager, I suppose. I was so painfully sore at the end of this week for all the time spent sitting on this super hard concrete floor. Remember, guys, I am 37 weeks pregnant in the clip you're watching now, and that is a lot of weight to be on my hips and my knees just sitting on a super hard concrete floor, but there was really no other way around it. And at least it was, you know, a fun-ish, you know, art-oriented project. I mean, I enjoyed doing this, but my body hated me. Now, the section that was really, really rough, the one square of concrete that my husband laid, he convinced me to wait and let him try to smooth that out before I painted it. I was kind of just gonna like live with it being that texture, but that was more or less just me being so ready to be done with this part of the process and ready to just like start building a greenhouse. But I'm glad he convinced me that waiting a few extra days so that he could smooth out that patch would be worth it in the long run. I'm glad I made that decision. So I'm doing pretty much everything I can on this entire half, with the exception of that really rough patch. We're going to address it really soon in the video. And I'm also using a different approach to stamping out the brick colors. I'm going like one color at a time instead of going from color to color and letting them mix on my sponge as I did in the first half. I also think that this turned out better than in the first half. And I also think it wasted a lot less paint doing it this way. When John came home from work, he used a tool that he had to kind of grind up the bad concrete in the places where his section met the professional guys section. This total process of smoothing out John's rough section took place over several days. He works a full-time job, and we have a life outside of this one project.
Well, it's been another long afternoon of DIYing this project, and I gotta say I am struggling with a little discouragement right now because I was hoping we would be able to actually begin constructing the greenhouse tomorrow. Tomorrow is Saturday, but I just feel like we cannot put a structure on this floor until it's done. Does that make sense? Like this area right here that kind of has the ugly looking concrete still needs to be grinded down, still needs to be smoothed with like it's like a concrete product that just kind of finishes and smooths. And then I'm of course gonna paint bricks that go all the way around here. I'm just sore everywhere, achy everywhere, tired, emotional about it, but just wanted to give you a status report. I mean, I do think the brick is looking really good. I just hoped it would all be done today so that we could build tomorrow, but we'll see. That's all I can say. We'll see.
Finally, a week later, the whole entire concrete surface was uniformly smooth. I was able to complete painting my brick pattern, and it was time to seal the floors. I'm not going to get too worried if some of this does wear off with time. I think it will look fine. It's just a plant room, it's just a greenhouse. But I'm going to be using this water-based matte polyurethane. For the application, there is definitely a better way to do this, but as of this clip, I am 38 weeks pregnant, kind of bending over. So I just poured a puddle and then I pushed it around with my little Swiffer mop and it worked well, but since the concrete surface was so abrasive, it tore through 2 of the little disposable absorbent heads, but the application worked fine. Finally, it was time to open these boxes that had been sitting on my back porch since May. And I'm just really glad that everything survived the elements for that long. I definitely hate that they were left out there, but there was really nothing to do, nowhere to store these items. And so after opening the boxes, John put me in charge of parts. So I just took everything out of the boxes and then kind of arranged them in order of part number so that they would be easier to find and locate. I did this both for the larger pieces and all the tiny little pieces. He was able to go ahead and construct the doors, which was the first step in the instructions. But eventually it became pretty clear that my most important work was occupying our 2 young children who were very interested in what was going on and who were getting quite in the way. And eventually, as the afternoon drew on, it was just time for me to take them inside, go ahead and make dinner for the family. So this was probably my best contribution to the greenhouse build on this day. And finally, it was Labor Day. And of course, by Labor Day, I mean September 1st. And having this day was really just such a blessing for this project because I'm just going to go on the record and say I love John so much. He spent all day on his day off powering through this building process. And I think we were both really stunned at how much he was able to accomplish in one day. So he started out by laying out the base of the frame and anchoring it into the concrete, which required drilling into the concrete with a concrete drill bit, and then inserting these pins, attaching the pins to the frame. I'm very excited about this step because this is going to add some much needed security to the greenhouse so that the wind doesn't blow it away and so that it can withstand, weather. Now, raising the walls was probably the first 2-person job we reached, and I was really happy to feel useful. Not gonna lie, it was still hard for me to stand still for long stretches, so I eventually had to sit down. And then, of course, the kids and the cat all wanted to come and sit with me, but we were able to keep working. We reached a minor roadblock when we discovered that the sections that had been anchored in were unfortunately not anchored in at a perfect square, and so there was quite a big gap in this part, so we had to kind of reposition some of the anchors. And finally, we were able to readjust the base of the frame and everything fit together perfectly. Raising the walls of this structure was kind of an annoying process because some of the pieces needed to be held in place while an adjoining piece was installed. But thankfully, it was a 2-person job, and so for the first time in a while, I felt like I could actually be useful. So this took us really most of the day, holding pieces in place, John screwing them in, and it really started to take shape. At this point, I was just really blown away by how much progress we had gotten done just on this one day. We went from having a concrete pad in this spot to having 4 walls, and it was incredibly exciting. And then finally time to start sliding in some of the panels. We continued this process well into the evening until we ran out of sunlight, and we got most of the panels in, but we had to call it a day.
I'm very happy with today's progress. Okay, I'm going in because I can't see.
The following Saturday, we were able to dedicate most of our time to the project, and it was time to assemble the top or the ceiling. Now, this is something I felt completely incapable of helping with, so we actually had planned for friends to come over later in the evening so that they could, stand on the ladder and do all that stuff. But as John assembled the frame of the ceiling, we suddenly found ourselves just doing it ourselves. I got up on a smaller step ladder and kind of bolted the corners of the frame in place, while John stood in the center holding it up the whole time. I mean, it wasn't heavy or anything, but he did the most important work of keeping it where it needed to be as I secured the corners of the ceiling to the 4 corners of the walls. It wasn't hard work. It wasn't impossible work. I was actually really proud of myself that I was able to contribute something like this to the project, especially for being 39 weeks pregnant. But I was completely worn out by the time I was done with that. And back to a one-person job. John continued the assembly instructions of adding in all of the support pieces to the ceiling and sliding in the panels. Now, some of the panels were a little bit tricky for him to get in, but I think that that's just because they were made to fit really snug and secure. It was really starting to come together at this point, looking like a complete structure, 4 walls and a roof. And it even began to rain while we were working on this, but because we were undercover, we stayed dry, and it was really cool to hear the pitter-patter of the raindrops on this little roof, and it just felt so official. To me, it was insane what a big difference it made to have the roof on. So this greenhouse kit came with miles and miles of rubber seal, which was wonderful because that's just going to really keep humidity and temperatures in, and it was super easy to just press it all into place. Well, work on the project came to a stop because I had our baby, but as soon as I could, we were right back out there working on it. I was sitting and watching as John was finalizing the roof. And in quite the daze, I was finally able to start moving plants into the space. I almost couldn't believe it that, at least the primary assembly was done and that things could now go in. It was super exciting, but a whole lot of work. I don't know, there's like 200 plants or something, maybe a little less in my collection. And so the first thing I had to do was take everything off of the shelves and then disconnect all the lights and the wiring so that I could move the shelves themselves into the greenhouse. Then once the shelves were in, all the plants had to go back and repeat this process. It was 3 shelves that I had full of plants, and then like the entire table in the screen and porch also was full of plants, and several plants just on the floor in the screen and porch. So it was definitely a lot of work, and it took quite a lot of time. If you're curious, that is just a tarp that is attached to the exterior of the screened-in porch because temperatures had started to get pretty low at night, and so this was our attempt to keep some of that heat in the screened-in porch. It's definitely a fun process to watch on time lapse, I'll give you that. But I was just feeling so motivated. I felt like I had waited months, and I kind of had waited months to finally be here. If you're paying attention to the dates, you'll notice that this is the third day of the process of moving plants inside, which should say a little something about how much free time I'm getting these days.
Quite the moment. Every single plant I own, aside from seedlings growing in my Ikea cabinet, which is indoors, the whole collection is now in the greenhouse. So, wow. I can't believe that we're here at this point. Very exciting. A lot of work remains to be done. Rearranging, because this setup is not ideal. Installing the misting system, exhaust fan, mini split unit, and then other things like a table, some supply storage. Okay, what we're doing next is we are going to completely disconnect all of the wires for the lighting that's been a part of these shelving units for like as long as I've had these shelving units, because I actually don't need artificial light anymore. At least I don't think I'll need it, but we're gonna manage it if a problem arises later. But we're gonna disconnect all the lights so that I can restructure these shelves. And I want to explain to you why. Behind me, it's very hard to see, but I've actually set up a brand new shelf. This is the same exact product as the 6-foot tall ones, except this one I've assembled into like a medium height and a short height. And the reason I'm doing that is because I am now getting natural light coming in for my plants. I don't want to have this many stacked up vertically. So like what I mean is the plants here on this top shelf are actually causing shade for everything beneath. And so instead of having 6-foot tall shelves with like 4 to 5 tiers each, I'm gonna take apart all my shelving units and convert them into what I did here, having a medium height shelf and a low height shelf. That way, all of the plants are receiving natural light more evenly.
disassembled, reassembled, and oriented the way that I want them. It's time to rearrange the plants, finally mitigate some spacing and crowding issues, put things where they look good together or where they fit nicely. This was a really fun day, and as you can see, I had little man with me, which, if you don't know, I'm sorry, I can't explain the joy of it, and then it actually rained later that afternoon, and so I ran out just to show you what it was like.
Today is all about plant stuff. We're talking substrates, cups and pots, nutrients, solution, all kinds of stuff, storage, moving it into the greenhouse and my separate storage unit, and trying to do a little bit of organization. I've also already gotten my husband to help me put the table here in the greenhouse, and hopefully today I can also manage to get the sink in there somewhere. It's crazy how much stuff you need for a plant collection like this.
The secret, real reason that John agreed to build me this greenhouse was to get all of my crap out of the garage. It was so much stuff I had stored away in the garage. I have a little storage unit for all the bulky stuff like substrates, and I took this clip on the 8th because this was the first time I actually was able to do a plant chore in the greenhouse, and I thought it was so cute that they were all three with me. I also got a smaller table and was able to put the sink in. Now, I gotta confess, I did not originally plan having this done, but it became clear that in order for this to actually function the way it should, we needed electrical work wired like legit, not just using an extension cord for all my needs. This was definitely an unexpected expense to add to the project, but it was the right move to make just to reduce hazards, dangers, and to make sure that I had enough power to run everything that I will need to run.
All right, the electrical guys have just left, and I honestly haven't really been out here, so let's check out how it looks and what they did. This is where the trench was. And look at that. Real, authentic electricity. Okay, this is my first time really taking a look at this box.
Okay, editing Clara has just realized I have given you no footage of this mini split installation. We did not do it ourselves, but a friend of ours who does HVAC came over and did it one day. I don't know where I was or what I was doing or why I did not mention it at all on camera. But this is just me popping in and saying, hey, huge step has just been accomplished. The mini split is installed and functioning beautifully.
It's called drip irrigation system, and I've got some kind of spider's egg sac attached to the back of it, which is pretty nasty. Honestly, this thing has been, oh, there's another one. This thing has been in my possession since what, April? May? And I have not even opened it up once. So let's see what we have. There are no instructions, only pictures, and not even like step-by-step pictures, but like a diagram of what it will look like when it's all put together. So I guess they're relying on me to understand what I'm doing here. We've got the tubing. This undoubtedly carries the water from the hose. Here's my adapter to go on the hose to fit into the tubing, if I'm not mistaken. And then these are the mist nozzles and the adapter pieces that go from tube to tube, if that makes sense. So I think that essentially all I need to do is just cut the tube to length. So you can see my sink here in the frame, which is not yet hooked up to water, but we are going to run a hose from the side of the house, drill a hole in the greenhouse wall to hook up the sink to water. I'll need to go ahead and probably buy a two-way split for the hose once it's in the greenhouse, because one path will need to go to the misting system while the other path goes to the sink. Okay, I'm beginning to understand this concept here. I think I've got a good handle of it. Let's just see how much I can put up in the time that I have today.
So it definitely took my postpartum brain a couple days to catch up to the fact that this system alone would not do anything without buying an external timer. So although I was able to get everything up and ready, I had to go online and order something, wait for that to come in. I will say that the timer I have now, I'm not sure if I'm going to be keeping that one because I would like for my mist to go off about every 45 minutes for only about maybe 10 seconds. The timer I originally purchased will only do a duration of mist as short as 60 seconds. So it's not exactly the best for my purposes. I wanted to just mention that if you are planning to build a similar greenhouse or add in a misting system, to pay a little bit more attention to the duration and intervals when you're ordering your misting timer. But all in all, I'm really happy with this misting system installed because it has already made such a big difference in the greenhouse.
The mist goes off in 3 minutes. Let's go check and see if everything is dry first. So what we want is for anything that got wet by the misting system to pretty much fully dry out before the mist goes off again. So it's set to go off in a few minutes, like 2 minutes. We've got a few drops here on a leaf of a monstera down below. I'm mostly looking for water collecting on the ground, on the greenhouse walls itself, anything that could cause like mold problems if it were to not dry out well enough. Honestly, I don't think I'm seeing any moisture level that concerns me. A few drops down here on these plants is not a bad thing. So let's stand back, wait for it to turn on. Okay, I think that went really well, actually. Okay, this is kind of funny, but look how humid it is. So I'm in the middle of doing a little bit of rearranging because after living with this setup for about 2 months, there are some things I'm not happy with. The first of them being how difficult it's been to access the bottom row of the back shelves. So here's what I've done instead. And as you can see, now I've got these little aisles and I can just walk down, access plants here. It's just a little bit of a different dynamic and I'm liking it so far. The other problem that this solves is any warm, dry air coming out of this mini split is no longer going to be directly on plants that were right here. Instead, it's just an empty space. It is sleeting, freezing rain. Listen to how this sounds. And it is holding at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 64% humidity. And that brings us to today, you guys. I'm recording on December 18th, and it is wild that this journey began all the way back in May. So a couple of other things were checked off the to-do list that I didn't necessarily film just because they were so simple, like hooking up water to the sink and doing a little bit of rearranging of my plant supplies. So now that the greenhouse is complete, there are a few things I want to talk about. First of all, I just want to say that I am not finally happy with the way things are arranged in here. I want and plan to do a greenhouse tour for you sometime in 2026 after I've lived in here a little bit longer, played around with the arrangements of plants and tables and shelves. I think it's beautiful in here so far, but I think it can be better. And I'm excited that a place like this is just kind of a blank canvas where I can play around, I can move things, I can make it look exactly how I want it to look, and just truly make it a beautiful space, not only to house the plants and provide their optimal conditions, but also to be a beautiful way to display the collection. I'm happy to report that several weeks into the winter, the greenhouse is operating beautifully at keeping the prime conditions for the plants. The mini split works just like it's supposed to. We have had sleet, we have had snow, and even earlier this week, it got down to 16 degrees outside, which is notably cold for North Carolina. We did decide to add an extra layer of insulation. I'm not sure if you can tell in the background of this, but we have bubble wrapped the greenhouse. That'll actually be your next video. Quick video, the process of winterizing the greenhouse, but with the bubble wrap, with sealing all the windows and doors, and with the mini split, I'm happy to report that temperatures were comfortably in the 70s in this small little space, even though it got as cold as 16 degrees outside. Now the humidity is another thing. Towards the end of the vlog section of this video, you saw that I was able to get the misting system hooked up, spraying the plants a couple times every day. However, since filming that segment, we have gotten below freezing a couple of nights here in North Carolina. And so as you know, when your temperatures are going to drop that low, you need to turn off your water and disconnect your hoses. Otherwise, the water is going to freeze and burst and ruin everything. So it's no big deal to just disconnect the hose that powers this misting system. The issue is then that when it's so cold outside and the mini split is running at full blast, and there's no misting system operating to add humidity to this greenhouse, it's been really tricky. I have two medium to large size bedroom humidifiers that I have in the greenhouse right now, and it is quite the task to make sure every night before I go to bed that those humidifiers are filled up, especially if the water to the sink out here has been turned off. So that's something I'm gonna need to troubleshoot throughout the winter. is how to keep moisture in this room when the water is turned off. I think that it would be nice one day to move towards using rain barrels as the water source. And I think a large volume of water in a rain barrel like that is less likely to freeze over in North Carolina winters. And so perhaps next winter, if I were to have rain barrels providing all the water needed for this greenhouse, including a misting system, I suspect that I might be able to keep it on and running year round. So I don't know, I guess that is just the only way to end a video like this. You guys, I'm just so happy, feeling so fortunate and blessed to have this space to grow my collection and to grow my hobby. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Yeah.